Good morning, everyone. I'm Vice Mayor Jeff Blueball, and welcome to today's Wichita City Council meeting. We'd like to start off with the invocation and a pledge of allegiance. The invocation will be led by Gideon Ludetke from Risen Savior Lutheran Church. Morning.
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together in this room as fellow citizens of Wichita, Kansas. May this time of discussion lead to prosperous and successful endeavors. May Wichita be a city on a hill and a light to the darkness. Let us promote proper decision-making, just actions, and true harmony with each other. Bless this council meeting today and all who are attending, either in person or watching online. Bless all of the decisions made today, that they be advantageous for our beloved city. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to have a moment of silence this morning for Eddie Graham. He passed away last week, a few weeks shy of his 102nd birthday. He was a veteran, a survivor of the Bataan Death March, and a hero from World War II who selflessly sacrificed during the war so that others could have a better chance of survival. This was Eddie's way. He never considered himself a hero. He created his survival to his faith and good fortune. Let's give him a moment of silence, please. Thank you, everyone. And just to let you know, Mayor Longwell, his absence today is because he is at the funeral for Eddie Graham. So thank you. If you've all had a chance to, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So if you've all had a chance to read last week's minutes, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of August 13th, 2019.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please cast your vote. And the motion passes 5-0. Next up, we'll have a proclamation, and Becky Tuttle is a member of the League of Women Voters, will be helping us present that this morning. Thanks, Becky.
Good morning. Can I have my League of Women Voter friends come down and join me today? Whereas the first local League of Women Voters in the United States was founded in Wichita, Kansas on June 10th, 1910, and whereas the League of Women Voters Wichita Metro is celebrating 100 years of continued voter service and women's right advocacy, and whereas the League of Women Voters nationwide and the League of Women Voters Metro are celebrating the centennial celebration of the 19th Amendment throughout the year with exhibits, luncheons, symposiums, parades, and rallies, and whereas the League of Women Voters Wichita Metro is hosting the Centennial Lunch on Saturday, August 24th, 2019, initiating a year-long commemoration of women's suffrage and accomplishments, and whereas Wichita is proud to be the home of the first League of Women Voters Chairman, James Brooks. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Becky Tuttle, on behalf of the Mayor of the City of Wichita, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim Centennial Celebration of the 19th Amendment of the League of Women Voters Tribute Day, and encourage all citizens to participate in the celebratory and educational events this coming year. Would you like to make a few comments, Martha?
Just very briefly, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Kansas and of Wichita Metro, we appreciate this recognition, honoring our centennial and also recognizing the centennial of the 19th Amendment, women's right to vote. While recognizing that these women's great accomplishments, obviously the work continues, and thus the need for the League of Women Voters. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Tom Ewert, CAT Ordinance Update from the Wichita Audubon.
Good morning. I spoke to you last year as a president of Wichita Audubon Society. My term is over now, but I'm still the designated spokesperson on behalf of Audubon on the issue of cats and TNR. Last year, we were alarmed that the city was considering a new ordinance for trap, neuter, and return, or a TNR policy for feral cats in the city. As animal lovers, and specifically birds, this is something which we oppose. Cats are natural predators, and they kill all kinds of wildlife, not just songbirds, but also rabbits, shrews, voles, and more. Audubon developed a position paper, which I read to you last year, and if this comes up for a vote, we'll send you a revised position paper, and we will actively oppose the proposed ordinance. During the past year, I've learned a lot about TNR, both in Wichita and other parts of the country. As you all know, I have been at all but one of the DAB meetings when this draft ordinance has been presented by the Animal Services Advisory Board. I understand that you've also received a lot of mail and a ton of information, and probably don't need to know, and probably you don't know any more what to think about the issue. Wichita Audubon was late to the process of the proposed ordinance. By the time we found out about it, everything was in place and our comments and suggestions were not considered or incorporated into the draft. We met with the Police Department Review Committee after they received the draft, and we offered what we thought were valid suggestions to improve the draft. These are things like buffer zones around our Wichita wild habitat parks, mandatory microchipping of all trapped cats so that some sort of accountability and record keeping can be done. None of this was incorporated into the draft or even brought up by the Animal Services at the DABs. As I mentioned, I was at all of your DABs. I heard the presentations and the questions from your citizens. You know that in total, 5 of the DABs voted against this proposed ordinance. Of the 53 advisors who voted on the draft, there were 36 who voted no. That's 68% who oppose it. Most comments I heard from the public were along the lines of, you mean you want to trap the problem cats and then bring them back into my neighborhood? Our neighbors overwhelmingly did not want feral cats running loose in their yards. So what do we do now? This thing is not going to go away. Just like a cat, it seems to have 9 lives. If we reject the new ordinance, it will not stop these folks from having cat colonies in our neighborhoods. They've been doing this for the past 10 years without an ordinance, and rejecting this proposal probably won't stop them. One advantage of the proposal is that all cat colonies would be required to be registered with Animal Services and to report annually on the number of cats in the colony. It would limit each colony to 8 cats, and the colonies would have to show a decrease in numbers over time. However, I have no confidence that any of this will happen. There is no consequences for not registering or reporting. There's no accountability to our neighbors from Animal Services. These people have been feeding outdoor cats in spite of the current city ordinance which prohibits this practice. In fact, you could say they are part of the problem, because without feeding, the cats would not survive and breed. We have an estimated 100,000 outdoor cats in Wichita, and an authorized TNR program will not reduce that number. TNR, as implemented by these folks, has never been shown to decrease the population of outdoor cats in an area as large as the city of Wichita. It reduces the suffering of the cats, it eases their lives, and if neutered, it allows them to live a relatively ordinary outdoor life of 8 to 10 years. But during those 10 years outdoors, they're still subject to the weather, to predation by coyotes and dogs, and being hit by cars. It exposes them to rabies from skunks and raccoons, and they continue to kill our native wildlife. TNR does not reduce the overall population of outdoor cats, it just brings those cats back into our neighborhoods. So what do we need? If your basement is flooding, you can turn on the sump pump. You can start bailing water, but you've got to turn the water off to stop the problem. This proposed ordinance does not do that. I'm sure there are not 100,000 truly feral cats in Wichita, but we do have an outdoor cat problem. If we change the ordinance, we should have a mandatory spay and neuter for all companion animals and a leash law for outdoor pets. You might laugh, but cats on leash is trending on Instagram. It is a common practice to have dogs confined to an enclosure in the backyard, and the same thing can be done for cats. Look up catios on Google. We need low-cost microchipping and licensing of cats, the same as dogs. We need buffer zones around our Wichita wild habitat parks. And we need an active animal services that doesn't refer all cat nuisance calls to an unlicensed and unsupervised group of activists.
Tom, how much time do you need left?
I got one more paragraph.
Can you wrap it up in 10 seconds?
Yep. I'm a graduate of WSU Biology Department. I live in North Wichita along the river. I've got raccoons and skunks that come through my backyard. The balance of nature would be upset if we started feeding them. That's what's happening right now. We have a vacuum effect when the food is there. I have a bird feeders in my yard, and when there's no feed in the feeders, there's no birds there.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Dan Warren, unpaved neighborhood streets.
Thanks, Dan.
Good morning. Our purpose for coming before you this morning is once again particulate matter from unpaved streets. Under the leadership of past council members Williams and Miller, the city began dust control around more than 20 schools, a very good first step. We came back to the council after witnessing the success of that program to prompt the city to take the next step, the next logical step, that of treating high-volume unpaved streets. Nothing happened. Had all viable leadership on this concern left with those women. Knowing Wichita environmental health officials flat out refused to look at any health issues or health impacts from the limestone dust, we contacted Kansas Department of Health and Environment. Showing concern for our complaints, they conducted a dispersion modeling for one unpaved street in our neighborhood. You have a copy of the first page of that model. Please look at the last paragraph, the sentence highlighted in yellow. 4 tons of PM10 per vehicle mile. Make no mistake, children must walk through it. There are no sidewalks. Councilwoman Claycomb and I met with a professional engineer 2 weeks ago right here in this building. He is employed by a firm that provides environmental and geotechnical services nationwide. He has been to this street. He told us, quote, "The model does not reflect the conditions in the field. The actual conditions are 500 to 700% worse," end quote. Not 4 tons of PM10, at least 20 to 28 tons of particulate matter. How much of that is being sucked into the lungs of the children and the frail living there? Why such a big difference? The answer is highlighted there in pink. Conversations with the city of Wichita. Public Works, no doubt. Public Works knew KDHE wanted accurate information. We have other correspondence to verify that. KDHE wanted an accurate silt fraction, and it appears someone in Public Works deliberately led them to believe 0.75 would be accurate. The aforementioned firm has performed sieve analysis of the surface material, more than one. We used the lowest one. That is how they know the actual conditions are much worse. Please look at Public Works PowerPoint portion below on your sheet. Unpaved street dust. The fine material necessary to bind gravel surfaces together gives rise to dust. When they present a PowerPoint to you, they tell you they have to have it. When they talk to KDHE, they say, we don't have hardly any. Public Works knows an unpaved street with a silt fraction of 0.75 would not be cohesive. And no such street exists in this neighborhood, probably nowhere in Wichita. Now, your job is to identify who provided KDHE the fudged information. We know from an article in the Wichita Legal, July 19, 2019, a resignation should be forthcoming. Is it because of Public Works' big thumb on Wichita's Environmental Health Department, the city is spending $10 million to preserve pavement and less than $100,000 to protect the public's health in neighborhoods like this? Some of you have been here long enough to remember when we first started telling you we needed to see how much PM10 these streets are producing. The environmental health officials in this city came to this chamber, the mayor's chamber, DAB meetings, with a 20-year-old test, a failed test. But they told you we don't need a test, we've already done tests. The results are none detected. KDHE says if you have a silt fraction of 0.75, you're going to produce 4 tons. Do you think any valid test would say there's none? You don't have to be a scientist to answer that. We want you to start treating the high-volume streets, not just in this neighborhood, in every neighborhood. Now, we know you have the money. We're talking a few $1,000s. I've seen the ads, surplus 2 years in a row. You forgot about these neighborhoods, didn't you? Why? I'm going to give you the best reason to do something about this. Many of you already know it. The best reason for taking action is when you do something like this for your neighbor, you do something like this for your Savior. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Thanks, Dan. Next speaker.
Sybil Strum, being treated like an outcast, and nothing has been done on her home.
I don't see Sybil here this morning. All right. Go on to the next item.
Consent agenda items 1 through 17.
Consent items 1 through 17. Would anyone like to pull any of the items for discussion?
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor, I'd like to pull item 13.
Okay. Item 13. Any others? I'd like to make a motion that we approve items 1 through 17 with the exception of item 13. It'll be pulled out for discussion.
Second?
Motion and second. Please cast your vote. Motion approved 5-0. Item 13 for discussion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. So I was just reading the green sheet. It has the distribution on the proceeds from this sale different than our normal process. And I'd just like manager to explain to me why we're deviating from our regular process for proceeds.
I'm going to ask Assistant City Manager Scott Rigby to talk about this in just a second, but the reason we're asking for your consideration of a different allocation of the sale proceeds is because we'd like to maximize the opportunity for the conversion of Emporia to a two-way street. We set the stage for that with the sale of property of a parking lot, $300,000, and CID proceeds that will go also for conversion. So there's about $500,000 that's been allocated. This additional $100,000 would help us take the actually increase the length of street that could be converted, starting at Central. Scott, if you want to.
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Fry. So originally when we did the TGC project back in November of last year, part of it was a sale of a city lot for $300,000. And then we had a CID that basically runs from First down to Douglas, and it goes west about 100 feet and then takes in the remaining property there at the corner. And the idea was to use those combined proceeds to see how far we could push the Emporia conversion. And at the time, we thought we could probably get from First to Waterman, apologize. And then as we further discussed, the ultimate goal would be to move it from Central all the way down to Lincoln. The concern, we wanted to start with the first phase to get to Waterman and see what we had to see if we could push up to Central. And then south, the concern we did have, we want to stop at Waterman, is because once you get past south of Kellogg, you get into residential. And sometimes there's a concern of residential moving from one-way to two-way. We want to have more time discussing the neighborhood. So we want to just focus on that first phase. So the idea was to use the roughly $500,000 to do that first phase. With this additional $100,000, we could potentially push it all the way from Central to Lincoln.
Central to Lincoln or Central to Waterman?
If we do the CID dollars plus the $300,000 from the sale, plus this $100,000, we could potentially go from Central all the way down to Lincoln and convert it for two ways.
All right, thank you.
I think the desire would be to get to Kellogg at least. right, and terminate at that point. Scott brings up a good point regarding the residential development south of Kellogg, and so I think my recommendation would be to, if the council is comfortable doing this, that we put the money aside for central to Kellogg, and then any funds that are available after that, we would roll back in and follow a council policy.
Okay, thank you. I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, so you just want to just approve the way it's written?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay. I'd like to take item 13 up for a vote and approve as written.
Second.
Motion and second. Please cast your vote. Motion approved 5-0. Next item, please.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated August 19th, 2019.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Mayor, City Council, Hannah Lang, Department of Finance. Today I present to you the August 19th Board of Bids Formal Bid Report. First engineering bid we have is 2019 Sanitary Sewer Reconstruction Phase 5. Recommendation is Amigo Excavation and Plumbing for $268,912. Paving Montecito to serve Auburn Lakes Edition. Recommendation is Conspec Incorporated for $310,108.35. Sanitary Sewer Lift Station, Force Main to serve Hoover Industrial Park, Second Edition. Recommendation is McCullough Excavation for $1,045,097. Salt Storage Building, recommendation is Multicon Incorporated. Base bid of $889,784. Add alternate 1 of $6,525, and add alternate 4 of $10,338. TV inspection system for retrofit existing system. Recommendation is Mayor Equipment and Supply for $88,500. Stormwater pump maintenance. Recommendation is JCI Industries for $45,444.26. Mobile printers and hardware, defer to August 26, 2019 Board of Bids date. Self-propelled mechanical street sweeper. Recommendation is Berry Tractor and Equipment Company for a base bid of $213,900. Option 2, add $5,980. Option 3, 6, 7, 8 are included. And option 10, add $46,875. Airfield pavement rehab electrical improvement, defer to August 26 Board of Bids. AV system at the Fire Training Center. Recommendation is Conference Technologies Incorporated for $327,132.96. New radios for Wichita Airport Authority, Police and Fire. Motorola Solutions for $255,000. That is all the bids. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? All right. I'd like to take the recommended action to receive and file the report, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and second. Please cast your vote. Motion approved 5-0. Next item, please.
Intent for healthcare facilities, revenue bonds, Presbyterian Manors, Inc.
Good morning, Vice Mayor and council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development. For the record, the item before you today is a request for a letter of intent to issue healthcare facility revenue bonds for Presbyterian Manors Incorporated. Presbyterian Manors is a private, not-for-profit 501c3 that is located in Wichita. It is a provider of independent and assisted living senior care throughout Kansas and Missouri. The City of Wichita has acted as the issuer of bonds for Presbyterian Manors since 1990. The City of Wichita will consider being the host issuer for bond projects in other municipalities if a company has its corporate headquarters in Wichita, as Presbyterian Manors does. The City of Wichita has interlocal agreements with other municipalities to act as the host issuer of these bonds. Presbyterian Manors Incorporated is now requesting a letter of intent to issue healthcare facility revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $53 million. The primary driver of this bond issue is to refund or refinance two outstanding series of bonds, the 2013 and 2014 bonds, in an amount of $31,550,000 to achieve an interest rate savings. In addition to that, the company is investing in improvements to facilities throughout Kansas in the amount of $17 million. There will also be a debt service reserve fund in an amount of $720,000. The cost of issuance is approximately $1.1 million, and a contingency in excess of $2.2 million, for a total of approximately $53 million. The new money projects will be invested in improvements in facilities in Ark City, Clay Center, Dodge City, Emporia, Fort Scott, Lawrence, Newton, Olathe, Parsons, Salina, Topeka, and Wichita. The Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982 requires a public hearing to allow any interested parties to comment on tax-exempt financing. This hearing is acting as the TEFRA hearing. TEFRA hearings will also be held in the other municipalities in which there will be investments. Therefore, it is the staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing, adopt the resolution of intent, and authorize the necessary signatures. Bruce Sjogren, who is the President and CEO of Presbyterian Manors, is here and can answer any questions specific to the company, and I would be happy to answer any questions as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the council at this time? Go out to the public. Is there any question or comment from the public? Bring it back to Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I move that the City Council close the public hearing, adopt the resolution of intent, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote. Motion approved 5-0. Next item, please.
Child care fee adjustments.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of the council. Alan King, Director of Public Works and Utilities. The child care contract that we have with KDHE, with Kansas Department of Health and Environment, it has a objective of enforcing different rules and regulations to make sure that our child care facilities are safe. And so the contract responsibilities include such things as plan reviews, orientations, actual inspections, and investigate complaints and compliance. KDHE charges each child care facility an annual license fee. They also, by contract, allow the city to charge fees to cover the city's costs. Right now, the funding for the city's child care protection program comes from both a KDHE grant and from the local fees for the services. The amount that we get from the KDHE grant has been slowly decreasing since 2012. And at the same time, our costs continue to increase, which creates a gap between funding and expenses. When you look at the general fund, we have revenue coming in these amounts, 132 now to 155,000. And we have expenses that have grown from 214, almost 15,000 to 250,000 for a gap, an amount that has to be made up by general funds that now has reached over $94,000. In 2018, city staff evaluated the gap, the funding of this gap, and looked at how we would be covering those expenses. Direction we've received from council is to look for adjusting fees so that those fees cover the costs associated with the programs that they are associated with. When you look at a $94,521 gap, we would have to take the existing fees that we charge now and increase them by 61% to close that gap. While we were looking at this program, we had actually a program supervisor retired, and that gave us an opportunity to reevaluate the entire program. And we looked at an efficiency by making some reassignments to the existing staff to be able to so that we didn't have to fill that vacancy of that person that retired, which gave us about a $72,000 savings by not filling that position, still leaving us a $22,000 gap that we would have to cover. Child Program has pursued an effort in parallel to encourage child care facilities to incorporate in their programs some child development training, things that would help children be ready for school and future education. Right now, we provide trainings that support curriculum in early childhood development, and we also have spoke with the providers regarding the development opportunities that we could make available to them. So when we look at the savings, we could increase the fees that we charge now by, instead of 61%, increase it by 20% to close the gap, and that would still give us some extra $31,000 in some extra funding. And as a result, we could use this extra funding to incentivize the development of curriculum for early childhood education. So if we pursued an approach where we put in place a 20% fee increase, and this would be applied to all our child care providers, and then if they committed to us to put in place or demonstrated to us that they have in place a childhood education program, then we would drop that down. Instead of 20% increase, it would only be a 10%. And we believe that the combination of the 20% for those that don't have the curriculum and the 10% that say they do, and we can verify that later, that would cover the costs of the program. So there are also some other fees that, for example, if a complaint is made and KDHE sends us out as their contractor to investigate it, there's a fee associated with that. That would also receive a 20% increase in that fee amount. So we conducted an early engagement process with the child care community and talked about the 61%, and most of them said that was going to present a problem for them, a hardship for them, and they asked if we could phase that in over time, 20% a year over 3 years. We also started looking at different ways, like I said before, to bridge that gap, and we took advantage of the efficiencies that I described earlier. And so what we wanted to do is to help us by going out and reaching out to the folks and talking about this other program, and it received very favorable comments. We also met with an outfit, an organization called Child Start. They're a care provider resource and referral agency, and we talked about what it was we had in mind, and they gave their enthusiastic support for the approach we're talking with. And we're considering having them partner with the city for the development of this curriculum. And this would be curriculum that would be available to the child care providers at no charge. So we've come today asking for the permission to go ahead and make these fee increases. And we have some folks here that are experts that can answer specific questions. I can also tell you that when we're talking about a 20% fee, that may not mean a lot, but say, for example, you have a home child care facility. If you're talking around about an $80 a year fee, we're talking about $88 at 10% or $96 per cent, to give you some sort of a sense of what the home child care facilities are looking at. And then when you look at the child care centers, preschools, schools, it's based on the number of children that are enrolled. If you get a child care facility that has between 51 and 75 people, normally that would be a $350 charge. We're talking about a $420 charge at 20%, or if they have a curriculum, and most do, it's a $385 charge. So that gives you some sort of an idea about the costs that we're talking about. And with that, I'm ready to stand for answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I just wanted to add, early childhood development and preschool education was a top priority coming out of Project Wichita. And I want to commend staff and Child Start staff for working together on looking at a creative way to help contribute towards that initiative for early childhood education. I've had several conversations with Superintendent of USD 259, who's also very supportive of an initiative like this to better prepare children before they reach school.
Alan, do we know what other fees they pay other than the city fees?
KDHE also has a fee, and it's similar to the fees that we charge in both of the way that they charge it and the amounts. But you're looking at that cost per count, and like I say, it depends on how many you have. It goes anywhere from up to 25 students at $265 a year, up to $565 a year for over 150 students. And the state's fees are similar in the amount and the way that they charge them. What we have in addition to a cost per student is the costs to cover going out and pursuing a complaint that's been made, an investigation. And if it only takes an hour, we're talking about $115 for that hour to go out and investigate. So those are the sorts of fees we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Frye?
Thank you. While I appreciate staff's creative solutions here and lessening the impact and finding the curriculum support, I guess my question is, how is it that the city of Wichita has this responsibility? How is it that we have this contract? Because it's really not a public works issue, and it's for the entire county. How come we have this contract?
Well, that became one of the programs that was in place in the Legacy Environmental Services Division that was incorporated into Public Works and Utilities, along with utilities. They had environmental and other sorts of programs that were like that. Tobacco enforcement, and other programs, a food inspection. So it was a group of environmental and KDHE type of programs that were put together in that division, and which was then brought into the Public Works and Utilities umbrella. And so those are legacy programs. We've been shedding some of those where it makes sense. So, for example, we've been in contact with the county and talking about them taking on some of these programs. Some of them have gone back to the state. Portions of our air inspection program, the state is taking it back instead of contracting out. So it really goes back to the history of where we used to have an environmental services division.
Do we see at some point in the future this would no longer be our contract and it would go to the state or to the county?
We haven't heard anything from the state suggesting that yet, but that seems to be the trend that they're on, and we have been in contact with the county. So if there isn't any immediate plans for that to go over to the county.
Thank you.
Councilmember Clendenin?
Pardon me, Bob. I've got a couple of comments or questions, and it may stray a little bit from the germaneness of what we're talking about, but as we go forward, looking at child care licensing and what we pay, one of the things that I've seen is a barrier to people getting jobs, especially single parents in low-income areas, are the availability of child care. And if there's any way that we can design a program that helps incentivize people to start good child care agencies or facilities in some of our low-income areas, I think there is an economic impact study that could be done of what that would do economically for some of those areas. There may even be a return to the city. I assume eventually we're going to be upside down again on our subsidy to some of these child care agencies, and so if we can use any of that money that we get from this licensing to incentivize a way to provide better child care in those areas. Just like transportation is a huge barrier for people. I'd just like to see if there's anything that can be done. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Go out to the public. Any questions from the public?
This may sound a little strange after my previous comments, but I think we're asking too much of Mr. King. The way I understand the ordinance, for someone in the city of Wichita be taking care of the environmental and health issues, the manager, the city manager, can at will appoint someone for that, unless I've missed something. There's a 2002 ordinance that gives you that permission, unless I'm missing something. I think it's a Charter Ordinance 183 or something like that. It seems like I've read that in my information. And why don't we let Mr. King concentrate on public works and let somebody else concentrate on environmental issues and food inspections and child care and stuff like that? I think that makes sense, and I think a city this size can do that. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Now I'll bring it back to the council. Any other questions from council or discussion? If not, I'll go ahead and take the recommended action to approve the curriculum incentive and adopt the fee resolution, authorize the necessary signatures, and approve the new position.
Second.
Motion and second. Please cast your vote. Motion approved, 5-0. Next item, please.
General obligation sales tax improvement bond sale.
Good morning, Vice Mayor and members of the City Council. Sean Henning, Director of Finance. The item before you is the general obligation sales tax improvement bond sale, which was held last Thursday. To provide a little bit of background, the city issues GO sales tax bonds to permanently finance road, bridge, and freeway improvements, and those bonds are repaid from a portion of the city's share of the countywide 1-cent sales tax. Related to the 2019 A sales tax bonds, the City Council authorized the sale of those bonds on July 23rd. As I mentioned previously, the sale occurred on August 15th, last Thursday, and the amount of bonds sold totaled $23.4 million. The proceeds from the bonds are primarily used to finance and reimburse expenditures related to the East Kellogg project, and the bonds will mature in 15 years. We received 6 bids, so it was fairly competitive sale. The successful bidder was Robert W. Baird and Company Incorporated with a rate of 1.796%. And that spread, there was a spread between the highest bidder to the lowest bidder was less than 0.2%. So it was a very competitive sale, and we ended up with a very competitive rate. To provide a few comparisons, the successful bidder came in at 1.79%. The current 10-year Treasury rate as of August 14th was 1.59%. With our last general obligation sale, which was in the fall of 2018, we had a rate of 2.55, and the last local sales tax sale that we had was in 2014 at a rate of 2.44. Market conditions have gone down considerably since those times. We initially projected a rate of 1.922 prior to the sale, so we came in better than what we anticipated. Just to provide a little bit more background, rates are impacted by many things. Some of those items include the size of the issuance, market demand at the time, credit quality, and volatility in the markets. Current rate is favorable, as I mentioned, with the last sale in comparison to the 10-year Treasury. And we also benefit from comments from our rating agencies with respect to our financial practices and stable financial management. Recommended action at this time is to ratify the award of the bid, adopt the bond ordinance, adopt the bond resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Do we have any questions? If not, I'll go out to the public. Is there any questions or comments from the public? Bring it back. Any additional discussion? If not, I'd take the recommended action to ratify the award of the bid by the city manager for the series of bonds, adopt the bond ordinance on declaration of an emergency basis, adopt the bond resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures. Oh, I'm sorry, James.
No, that's okay.
Councilmember Clinton.
Bob, I just want to say thanks to staff and everybody who's doing an amazing job at managing the city. It's one of our kind of core responsibilities as a well-run city. And we don't get these bond rates if we're not keeping our debt levels at the right level, and have amazing finance department who's making sure that we are keeping things in line for our citizens. So just wanted to take the opportunity to thank staff and you and everybody who's doing a great job. Thanks.
Okay.
Second the motion.
Motion is second. Please cast your vote. The motion approved 5-0. Next item, please.
Quarterly financial report for the quarter ended June 30th, 2019.
Good morning again, Vice Mayor and members of the City Council. Sean Henning, Director of Finance. The item before you is the quarterly financial report for the second quarter of 2019. This report provides an audit activity through June 30. It also provides results and comparisons back to the adopted budget and the prior year. For the debt service fund and for the general fund, it also provides projections to year end. And those projections are consistent with what you've recently heard and seen in connection with adoption of the revised 2019 budget. Just a few key points that we'll cover this morning. The report tracks very closely, again, to the 2019 revised budget. I'd like to mention that the condition of the Gulf Fund continues to struggle and deteriorate. Recent economic news may signal, and it's something we're keeping an eye on, a potential slowdown in the future. Some of the highlights for the general fund: interest earnings are projected to be $10 million over what we originally planned with the adopted budget, and that reflects an increase of $5.5 million. We certainly expect that we will hopefully get there at the end of the year, but current market conditions can change going forward. We have had some mild weather that's impacting the electric franchise fees. We should have a better idea of how the seasonal fluctuations will impact those revenues through the end of third quarter. And then golf revenues continue to decline, and the cash position continues to erode. At the end of second quarter, the rounds were 9% lower, and there were approximately 6,000 fewer rounds played as compared to last year, and revenues are also down 9% in comparison to last year. To kind of give an overview of our total bonded debt, it totals just over $1 billion. Of that amount, 70% of our outstanding debt consists of revenue bonds and GO bonds that will be repaid from enterprise funds. The strictly GO at large portion of our outstanding debt totals $43 million and represents only 4% of our total outstanding bonded indebtedness. As I mentioned just a minute ago, the GO debt is 4%. Some of the things that will impact our outstanding bonded debt between now and the end of the year in the third quarter, we just will show an increase with the recent local sales tax sale that you just ratified. We will have an additional issuance of general obligation bonds and temporary notes in the fall of 2019, and you just authorized that sale this morning on the consent agenda. Those bonds are preliminarily sized at $68 million. And then we also are, with current market conditions, we're also evaluating refunding opportunities that we can take advantage of to provide savings in interest costs. In summary, we are consistent with the recently approved 2019 revised budget. Golf fund continues to be challenged, and we do expect the general fund to be balanced at year end. As I mentioned previously, also the seasonal impact on weather, on utility sales, will largely be known and kind of give us a better idea of where we will end up with franchise fees, which is one of our big contributors to our revenue in the general fund. And then also with the third quarter report, we'll focus on projecting year-end results and further identifying any issues that we see at that time. So at this time, I'd suggest the recommended action, which is to receive and file the quarterly financial report for the period ending June 30th, 2019.
Any questions from council? If not, I'll go out to the public. We'll bring it back for discussion. I'd like to take the recommended action to receive and file the quarterly financial report for the quarter ending June 30th, 2019.
Second.
Motion is second. Please cast your vote. Motion approved 5-0. Next item, please.
PUD 2019-8, City Zone Change to amend Revolution Planned Unit Development on the south side of East Central Avenue between North Volusia Avenue and East Estelle Avenue, 2721 East Central Avenue.
Morning, Vice Mayor, City Council. Scott Knable with Metropolitan Area Planning Department. The item before you today is to expand the Revolution PUD, which is located at the southwest corner of Central and Volusia. I suspect many of you are aware that this is a development that's comprised of interconnected portable storage containers that has as its primary building design with outdoor seating areas throughout that are shared by the multiple vendors that include both food vendors as well as retail vendors. The site is designed to be a walkable development, which included a recently installed pedestrian crossing at Central, which allows people to both walk there from the neighborhood to the north, as well as to use parking resources that the applicant owns on the north side of Central. It also includes transit and a bike share station. The area in gray on the map is the existing PUD. The area in red and yellow that's outlined by blue is the areas that they're intending to expand their application area. You can see the aerial. It shows that the property to the west has a current funeral home on it, which is proposed to stay, and the area south of the alley on Estelle is a vacant site that's proposed to be used for parking. You can see the comprehensive plan indicates that this is an area where we anticipated expansion of commercial uses like what is proposed here. This is the site plan that shows the proposed use. The area that is highlighted in orange is one of the principal reasons for this amendment. That will be, the applicant is going to seek a license for a common consumption area where the vendors in the facility can serve alcohol to patrons, and then those patrons can then take that alcohol out into the common seating area. At this moment, they're not allowed to do that, and there are, if you've been there, numerous signs at the various vendors indicating that alcohol purchased at those establishments cannot be taken to other areas within the development. So that's one of the primary purposes. The second primary purpose is to expand the on-site parking onto the area of Parcel 3 as well as Parcel 2, which they've been using for on-site parking because it is presently zoned to allow that. That Parcel 3, and the main point I need to make today, They're proposing a gravel parking area there, and we'll talk about that here in a second after I show you the site pictures. This is at the corner of Central and Estelle. Looking to the east, you can see the existing funeral home. This is Estelle looking to the south from that same intersection. You can see on the left there the parking area, the vacant lot where they're proposing the gravel parking area. Here's a close-up of that. You can see that that's already being used in some respects in that manner. This is looking back north along Estelle to the properties to the west. You can see that they're commercial properties predominantly along the central corridor, both east and west of the site. And then this is the most recent expansion of the container development that occurred onto Parcel 2, which was allowed by the limited commercial zoning, but the common consumption area that they're proposing will be facilitated by this PUD. And this is looking back to the west from Central and Volusia. You can see the front of the development there on the left of the picture. The Planning Commission, when they considered this, recommended approval unanimously by a 9-0 vote. However, they recommended that the parking area be paved as opposed to being gravel, as the applicant had requested. The District Advisory Board considered the request subsequently, and they recommended unanimously as well by a vote of 8-0 to approve the request with the same stipulations as the Planning Commission, with the exception of the surface of the parking area. They agreed that with the applicant's request to allow it to be a gravel parking, or what we actually call in the code an all-weather surface, which is has some standards that stand up better than just maybe a typical gravel surface like what is on that lot today. The recommended action to the City Council is to allow the gravel surface for the parking area. To do that, that would require an override of the Planning Commission recommendation and adoption of the District Advisory Board recommendation. Under state statute, that requires a 2/3 majority vote on first consideration, which would mean 5 affirmative votes, which, given today's attendance, would be a majority or a unanimous vote of the entire council. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Councilmember Claycomb?
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. I have just a couple of questions. In the minutes from the meetings and all that, there was things about additional parking signage.
That's
and I know
correct.
that's not part of the what we're voting on, but I take it that that the developer's willing to do that.
That's correct. There were several members of the community, residents south of the development, that came to both the Planning Commission and the District Advisory Board, and had several separate meetings with the developer and the developer's agents regarding parking and impacts on the neighborhood regarding parking. The developer is working on a signage plan that would direct patrons to the development, to the additional parking areas that are contained within this PUD development, as well as additional parking that they own on the north side of Central. And I was party to several of those conversations, and I think the residents are satisfied with that.
Okay. Yeah, I think this has become so popular that people do drive there in addition to the neighbors walking, right?
Yes.
And then, do I understand that I understand the funeral home will stay, that building will stay, will it stay as its current use?
I'm not aware. It's not.
Okay.
It's certainly not required to be a funeral home, so potentially it could convert to any of the uses that the PUD allows over time.
Okay.
Could be removed, could be further expansion of the container development as well.
Okay. So they have a lot of flexibility with that.
Yes.
And then the common consumption area, is this the first one we've done?
Yeah, to my knowledge, yes.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Councilmember Fry?
Thank you, Scott. Related to the paved versus gravel parking lot, are there limits to how many cars can be parked on a gravel lot?
There's not a overall number limitation in terms of the paving. They do have, and they showed us a system that's used in other municipalities that allow gravel parking more readily than we do. where they can delineate the spaces, even in a gravel parking lot, using various markers and those sorts of things to maximize the amount of utilization of that.
So we could end up seeing more cars on a gravel lot than we would on a paved lot?
Potentially a couple more on a lot like this. I mean, the lot's not very big, so you potentially could see people not following those markers and parking closer together than they would, parking, with aisles that are not as wide as they might be. But quite frankly, people do that on paved lots with striping too.
That's true. MAPC their motion was requiring the paved lot because that's our code, correct?
That's correct.
But we do have some waivers in other places in town?
We have granted gravel through PUDs. Examples are, the pop-up park that this developer has done in downtown. There's been a couple of PUDs down off of MacArthur for industrial development, one that you considered here at your last meeting. Trying to remember the name of it. Iron Horse, I believe, is the name of it. So it is done. This is not unique. This is not the first time we've done it.
And are the developers saying that this gravel lot is temporary because of cost, and then they eventually plan to pave it, or is there some other compelling reason why they want to do it gravel?
Actually, the intention of doing the gravel is that it is more permeable, and it's an environmentally friendly solution to parking that they see as overflow and used only at certain times.
Okay. Thank you.
And I had similar questions as Councilmember Fry because I know this has come up in my district before. So anyone else can follow this process as well if they want to request a gravel parking lot? Because I was under the understanding that there were some restrictions set out by fire.
And there are. If the lot is used for access to buildings, that is correct, that access aisle does have to be paved. And in fact, the Iron Horse development that I referenced, there are circulation aisles that are paved for fire purposes with gravel areas off those.
Didn't we have one down there on MacArthur and West Street where we allowed them to have, I think they did some partial paving and gravel because they had to have enough area to turn around a fire truck?
That's correct, yes. That's another example. The one, I've forgotten the one on West Street for Red Guard, but that was done that way as well.
Okay. And I would like to read a statement that Councilmember Johnson sent me. And he said that he supports the modifying the MAPC recommendation and allowing the gravel parking lot. Dab and the other neighbors approved it, and Mr. Ramsey has been good understanding of what it takes to maintain it, and the neighbors actually requested the DAB support for the gravel parking lot. So that's from Councilmember Johnson. So with that being said, I'd like to make the motion for the city zone change to amend Revolution Planned Unit Development, PUD number 53, on the south side of East Central Avenue between North Volusia Avenue and North Estelle Avenue, 2721 East Central.
Second.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Motion and second. Please cast your vote. And the motion approved 5-0. Next item, please.
Zone 2011-5, ordinance for a zone change request from the single-family residential district and multi-family residential district to multi-family district, generally located northwest of Oliver Avenue and 27th Street North.
Again, Scott Knable with the planning staff for the record. The item before you is a request to rescind the platting requirement that was placed on an approved zone change from 2011. Prior to, I think it was 2016, excuse me, the Planning Commission had a policy that required all zoning changes to be subject to platting or replatting the property before they went into effect. The development community approached the Planning Commission indicating that this was creating difficulties in marketing properties that had been approved for zoning changes because potential purchasers have become very computer savvy and are able to look up the zoning on our map. And as you can see in this map, the white color in that black outline is single-family zoning. The green color is the MF29 multifamily zoning. The orange color above that is the MF18 multifamily zoning that the applicant was approved for in 2011. Subsequent to that input from the development community, the Planning Commission rescinded the policy that required zoning changes to be approved subject to plating and put in place a process where people who had previously approved zoning changes that were subject to that plating requirement could seek city council approval to remove that plating requirement so that the zone change could become effective. And so that is what the applicant is seeking today. Most of these requests we've placed on the consent agenda. However, in this circumstance, and you can see this is the site here, you can see that the requested development is very consistent with what the use is on the immediately adjoining property to the north and is identified as the appropriate location for residential use. But the reason we've placed this on the non-consent is when the request was approved in 2011, there was a protest petition, and so the planning staff has been placing items on non-consent when there is a protest petition, so we wanted to bring this to your consideration. The recommended action is to rescind the plating requirement. That would then allow the zone change to become effective upon signature of the ordinance and publication. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions from council? Councilmember Clayton?
I just want to make sure I understand the protest. This protest was in 2011.
That's correct.
And
This was filed.
Could there have been another protest on this item?
No, because the action that is being requested is just to rescind a requirement of a previous approval.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? And again, I did get a message from Councilmember Johnson on this, and he said he did support this action. So I'd like to take the recommended action to rescind the one-year plating requirement imposed on the zone change request, authorize the mayor to sign the ordinance and place the ordinance on the first reading and publish the ordinance.
Second.
Motion and second. Please cast your vote. And motion approved 5-0. Next item, please.
Resolution authorizing participation in the Chief Elected Officials Board of Kansas Workforce Initiative for Innovation and Opportunity Act, Local Area 4.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of council. Jennifer Magana, City Attorney. This item comes before you as a result of the Workforce Alliance requesting that the city enter an agreement continuing participating in the Workforce Alliance Chief Elected Officials Board. We have currently, in the past, actually participated through REAP, the Regional Elected Officials Organization. This year, the agreement provides for the city of Wichita to appoint one of its own elected officials to serve on a 3-year term as a member of the Chief Elected Officials Board. The state of Kansas has determined that it's necessary for cities and counties to have their own elected official as a member of the board, and we have this agreement to present to that effect. Just as a matter of practice, the grant recipient for Region 4 Workforce Innovation and Alliance grants is, the grant recipient is the Chief Elected Officials Board. The Workforce Alliance of South Central Kansas is the nonprofit that administers these grant funds. The city's participation in this board would allow the city to continue to appoint members to the Workforce Development Board and to have oversight over the grant funds budget. So this resolution will authorize the mayor's participation to a 3-year term and authorize your participation in the Workforce Board, Chief Elected Officials Board, and would suffice for the state of Kansas's requirement that the city be represented. There was an agreement to share liability as a part of that requirement. to cover the city's liability for any use of, or misuse of grant funds. The city has been named as an additional insured under the Workforce Alliance's errors and omissions policy. So with that, we would recommend that the council adopt the resolution that does authorize this participation. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? No, I'd like to take the recommended action to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion and second. Please cast your vote. And the motion approved 5-0. Next item, please.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
Does anyone have any comments or board appointments this morning? All right. I would like to make a motion to adjourn today's council meeting.
Second.
Motion and second. Please cast your vote. And meeting's adjourned. Motion passed 5-0. Thank you, everybody.
Can you come back next week?
Absolutely.